So now for the audience, if you can tell us what exactly climate finance means and sustainable finance means. So just one quick question. So you mentioned about the social angle of it. So how does financing goes into that social angle? I mean, we have already heard about environmental impact and the finance going into that. But what about social part? So now I'm asking you a question from the perspective of a candidate or a student. So when you look at all of the three financing space under sustainability, which space is much bigger in terms of getting a job or getting an opportunity, entry level opportunity? Suppose if I come from a non climate risk or non sustainable finance background, not even remotely connected to climate or geography or something like that, and I want to enter into this space. So what, according to you, should I do as a candidate? You mentioned about financial modeling, the initial part, right? Financial analysis or modeling. So is that a key skill set that is needed? And apart from this, is there anything else in terms of skill set that a candidate should know? Hello guys, hi, this is Ganesh Nayak. I help finance professionals and students to excel in their career and become a better version of themselves. And I also help students preparing for other competitive exams. And we have started out with a podcast series. And as a part of that series, I'm today with Saurabh, and he's going to be guiding us with career in sustainable finance. So Saurabh, thank you very much for taking out time and talking to us. If for the benefit of the audience, if you can just give a gist about your career till now, and then we can start with the series of questions.
Thanks, Ganesh. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that I can be helpful in guiding future students to get into this new stream of sustainable finance, which I am a part of for last around 9 years or so. So, in terms of my introduction, I am Saurabh Trivedi. I am a sustainable finance specialist working with a global finance think tank called Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, IFA. It is US headquartered think tank focusing on various aspects of sustainable finance, especially into the energy sector and how to increase investment into the sector. How can the world transition even faster into this sector so that the risk of climate change can be mitigated and can be overcome, and with the instrument of financing. As far as my career is concerned, I did my MBA in finance from IBS Business School, Hyderabad. I got a placement into a real estate investment trust as a business analyst, and my role was looking into various investment structures. And because this was a real estate investment trust, and it was headquartered in the US and assets within India, so my role specifically was looking into new transactions, new investment strategies, new investment opportunities, and that will encompass a lot of research, financial modeling, preparing pitch books, presentation for prospective investors. And so it was a great profile to start, and it was a typical MBA finance profile to start with. And I would say that I learned a lot during those around 18 months that I was there. Then I moved to JP Morgan, and that was a bit of a mid to front end investment banking / investment management role.
Okay.
My work there was into valuations of various real estate investment that JP Morgan used to do through its $1 billion property funds. And my task was specifically to do financial modeling to understand what is the right valuation of that particular property investment, look into various things like leases, tenant agreement, vacancies, market, cost of capital, interest rate, macros, everything. So again, that was a great role to work with. I was there for almost 9 months, but then I was always thinking like something is missing. Brand were great, money was great,
Okay.
but something was missing. Like I don't know, I didn't know at that point of time. So maybe I was thinking that there's not enough impact that I am creating through my work, at least what I could see. So I was looking into various things. Then I briefly joined MSCI, which was then Morgan Stanley Capital International. I was into real estate index team, They are creating various indexes for real estate for European geographies. I was there only for 2.5 months. Then I got an opportunity
Okay.
with a think tank which was just starting in India into climate finance space, and I will come into later what is climate finance, what is sustainable finance. Um, and that was something which struck me, like I think this is something which seemed to be quite impactful,
Okay.
directly related to what, how can finance impact something which is directly related to our lives. So I latched into that opportunity. I could see there were very few professionals at that point of time, at least known from finance, I would know. And there were no podcasts like yours, which could have guided me at my very early career stage. That, okay, now you're switching from a real estate investment banking background to a very different
Right.
career, which no one knows. So yeah, that was my jump there. But I would say now looking back and connecting all the dots, that was a great jump, I would say. I was working with the Climate Policy Initiative at that point of time, and that was again US based think tank, but it was housed under Indian School of Business, ISB Hyderabad.
Okay.
So I was working there within their innovation center, and
Hmm.
again, main task was doing financial research, climate finance, designing new financial structures, analyzing various financial policies to increase investment into clean energy sector in India.
Hmm.
So I was there for 5 years almost, from 2014 to start of 2020. Then I got sponsored by Australian government for a very different, a unique industry PhD program where
Okay.
industry and academia will come together, work on a joint project, and that project will become like your thesis for your PhD. So I
Okay.
got sponsored. I applied for that. I moved to Sydney through the sponsorship by the federal government here in 2020, just 3 4 months before the COVID started. And I was supposed to work with Australian energy regulator for their energy finance stream. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, all the research work got into the back seat. So that was a bit of a shocker for me in the sense that I came specifically for that kind of exposure, working with government directly, looking into some,
Right.
it's a very different electricity market here, and how can clean energy be incorporated more, and that I could transfer that knowledge eventually to India at some point of time. But that did not work out. So then I was looking for another industry partner. There were other options like Macquarie and some big investment banks, but they were not specifically into sustainable finance or climate finance or energy finance.
Okay.
So I got into my current employer, which is IFA, Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, and they agreed to be my industry PhD partner in
Okay.
April 2020. And then I worked separately for IFA for their research projects, and then separately for my thesis, which was not the initial idea. It was supposed to be a joint thing, but then because there
Hmm.
was no industry partner aligned to my interest, I had to work separately on both these projects. Um, and now I am done with my PhD. My thesis has been accepted, so
Wow.
in May this year. So I'm soon to be getting doctorate from my university here. And now I'm full time with IFA, working for Australia and India team into similar topics. But now again, I have more understanding, more skills from my PhD, which I can transfer from pure academic research to do more industry research. So yeah, so far almost 9 years into this domain, and yeah, happy to answer any question. This is my journey
Wonderful.
between details.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Saurabh. So, before we move ahead, one quick question. So, in 2014, you moved from real estate background to climate finance. Was there a challenge moving into that role, or was there a sync?
I would not say, because it was completely new to me. As I said, my main focus was looking to work somewhere where I can use my financial skill and create some impact as well. So of course,
Mhm.
because I was already into these top firms, which any finance professional would want to join, and at a
Mhm.
very early stage of your career. It was not an easy task switching from there. And in fact, when I joined, because these were not-for-profit organizations, completely research focused, and
Right.
works like NGOs. So of course, so challenge was in terms of new sector, and challenge was in terms of there was nothing, no background about these things in India. So I didn't know
Okay.
like where I'm going forward. So I didn't have any kind of a trajectory of career path that it will
Right.
take me. So that yeah, those are the challenges. But I think now the field is growing quite significantly.
Hmm.
At least globally, it has grown massively, I would say, and India is now catching up. So a lot of opportunities are there, and I would say a lot opportunities are going to be there. So yeah, if it was a challenge at that point of time, I would not say that it is a challenge anymore.
Okay, wonderful. So now for the audience, if you can tell us what exactly climate finance means and sustainable finance means.
Okay, so just a very short description for what is sustainable finance, which is like an overarching for everything: climate finance, green finance, or social finance for that matter. So sustainable finance is something where um, the finance has to flow into something which takes into consideration about environmental risk, social risk, and the governance risk. And I will tell you in more detail what are these risks specifically
Okay.
into their investment decisions. Earlier, it was all about shareholder. The finance was all about shareholder returns, shareholder profit, shareholder risk. But increasingly, it is now more about stakeholder concerns, which encompasses the shareholder risk and return objective as well. But now,
Mhm.
all these things like environmental risk, if it is even so, environmental risk will be your climate risk, the high temperatures that we are seeing in India right now, floods, droughts, increased frequency into natural disasters, waste, pollution, so all those things come within the environmental category or environmental risk. Within environmental risk, there's a specific category which I have been part of is climate finance, and which is specifically looking into climate risk, and that pertains to your carbon emissions,
Okay.
which is which pertains to the emission into across all our industries, whether it is power sector, whether it is steel, whether it is transport. So all those sort of risks, because at the heart of climate risk, it is the emission level that is aggregating into our climate or atmosphere. So and so that is called climate finance. How the finance can change the landscape, or how finance can mitigate the climate risk, or so
Okay.
that the emissions can be reduced. Within the climate finance, so there are two streams actually. One is climate mitigation finance, other is climate adaptation finance. So mitigation finance is simply how you can mitigate all these climate risks through, of course, investments in various policies.
Hmm.
So that can be done through proliferation of various clean energy technologies, shifting the
Okay.
businesses from high carbon intensive businesses to low carbon business models, let's say from internal combustion engines transport to
Electric.
electric mobility, or in that matter from coal-fired power plants or gas-fired power plants to solar, wind, all those sort of things. So that is called
Okay.
mitigation. How you can mitigate the level of climate risk through reducing the emission levels. Other is climate adaptation finance, which is now it is given that the climate change risk is there. Now you have to build an infrastructure which is resilient to adapt to this risk. So you
Okay.
build your road in a way that do not get impacted by high floods, frequent floods, create bridges which are very resilient to sea level rises,
Okay.
and they can withstand frequent monsoons in some cases, or any cyclones in some part of the country. So how you build that kind of infrastructure, how finance can help in doing that, how to make a financing case for that, what kind of money is required. So that is climate adaptation finance. If you go slightly broader, it is more environmental finance, in the sense you cover other
Okay.
aspect of environment like water issues, cleanliness, waste issues, air pollution, uh, anything which is related to environment. Then you have social risk, where the considerations like labor rights, gender issues, equality, work environment, all those things come into picture, and that is also becoming very important. And then finally, you have a governance risk, which is anything related to transparency about the company, the corruption issues, whether companies are disclosing its uh, issues or any risk properly into the report
Okay.
or not. So all those sort of things comes into governance risk. But all these three pillars, E, S, and G, is called ESG in acronym, which is quite popular nowadays, and everything is encompassed within the broader term called sustainable. Or when you link it with the finance, it is called sustainable finance. So it's like an interdisciplinary of all these risks and attaching it to
Okay.
the with the finance. So that is what sustainable finance incorporates.
Okay. Okay. So just one quick question. So you mentioned about the social angle of it. So how does financing goes into that social angle? I mean, we have already heard about environmental impact and the finance going into that. But what about social part?
So what happens actually, uh, it is becoming like, so we understand that there are gender issues, right? There
Mhm.
is less representation of females in most of our corporates. It's not only in India, it's across the world. So investors want a fair representation of females into the organization, not only at the junior level but also at the senior and top level management.
Okay.
And that's the investor pressure that is coming into, whether it generates a value or not, but it has a societal impact overall. So there is a larger impact that is out there, which has to be taken into consideration whenever an investor which is concerned about these things will ask you to do if it wants to invest into your company. So to meet the investor requirement, you have to do all that. Similarly, your work environment should be something which is conducive to work. The It should not be an inhumane environment to work with. Like people who are working in
Okay.
the mining sectors, you have to
Mhm.
ensure that they are taken well care of. Their families are in good situation, whether it's financial situation or whether it is their health condition.
Right.
And similar, and recently what we have seen during the COVID time, there's a lot of money that was going into health companies, health sector companies, and also a lot of public money was raised, social bonds, to invest into vaccine formulation and coming out with different
Okay.
medicines. So that is another angle, so which again is more focused into social aspects.
Okay, perfect, perfect. But for the now, I'm asking you a question from the perspective of a candidate or a student. So when you look at all of the three financing space under sustainability, which space is much bigger in terms of getting a job or getting an opportunity, entry level opportunity?
Yeah, so in fact, I have been working in this very specific domain of clean energy finance and now expanding it to some other sector. But again, this is very focused on climate finance domain. And I would
Mhm.
say most of the investments, research funding is going into this sector only. And within the climate finance also, it is very niche. It is primarily going into the energy finance sector. So this is
Okay.
something one can start with, start understanding of the energy sector more. And of course, you
Mhm.
should have your financial concept very clear, because here we are talking about creating systemic change, because you have very old financial system which are not accustomed to think from these kind of risk.
Right.
So uh, you have to understand the what is the old system first, and then
Hmm.
understand what are the new risks that are coming up, which has to be integrated into the existing system or maybe modify the existing system. And so yeah, I would suggest to start with one sector, pick within the energy if that is of
Mhm.
interest for you. It can be a power sector within energy, it can be a transportation within energy, or it can be high intensive or very hard to abate sector like steel. Pick one sector during your MBA, or if you're doing CFA, get a good understanding of that. what is happening, what are the new technologies that are coming up, whether they are commercially viable or not. Yeah,
Okay.
so understand the macro trend into that sector. What is the landscape out there? Just pick one sector at least, and then you have a
Okay.
finance concept you should be ready with.
Okay, wonderful. And suppose if I come from a non climate risk or non sustainable finance background, you not even remotely connected to climate or geography or something like that, and I want to enter into this space. So, what according to you should I do as a candidate?
The ideal profile is someone who is a climate scientist and who has a good understanding of finance. So because it's a pure interdisciplinary stream, and that's why you see a lot of B schools are coming out with the courses which teach you the climate science and as well as the finance during your MBAs. But that is very difficult to have. But what is happening, at least I'll just give you some perspective. What is happening in globally that a lot of climate scientists are getting into finance because they understand the climate is better. Now they are trying to learn finance within those companies. They understand the climate modeling, what is happening out there. But for a student who's into the B schools right now, or they are doing CFAs or FRM, how they can start if they do not have any idea about sustainability? Start. The given is that you have a good understanding of the finance concept,
Mhm.
right? That is given. Whatever you are getting taught in your B school, that should be very clear from the macro to the micro level and also to the stock level, I would say, company level. Second, to understand the sustainability, I would suggest three things that a student can do. First is try to do one project at least in your during your MBA, which is focusing
Okay.
on this topic. That will give you a flavor of what it is all about. Then you start reading about it, and you will be able to gauge whether you are interested doing this or not.
Okay.
Second, try to get an internship with an organization like us, which is a research think tank, or get into a bank. Now, banks are coming up with specific positions for ESG finance candidates. If they have an internship
Right.
position, try to get into there. There are a lot of research organizations now, even in India, which are giving this kind of positions. So, yeah, that is second way to get some kind of exposure into this
Mhm.
space. Third is about certifications. Certification is something which gives perception or which tells the employer that you are serious about a particular topic. So there are various certifications available now. Some are
Mhm.
free. A lot of MOOCs are available, open courses. But two certifications that come into my mind. One is sustainability and climate risk certification, which is given by GARP, which also provides FRM, which
Right.
is quite good. Second is ESG investing certificate by CFA Society. So those two are quite well known into this area. So that will give you very good understanding, a conceptual understanding, I would say, and can help you getting your first job. And what is happening currently, there are
Right.
less candidates with this kind of expertise. So if you have this certification, it will be, I would say, easier for you to get into the finance role rather than going to a typical traditional finance kind of role. So if you can do this
Okay.
certification or do a couple of things that I suggested, I think that will be greatly helpful to get into your landing into your first job.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. And you mentioned about financial modeling, the initial part, right? Financial analysis or modeling. So, is that a key skill set that is needed? And apart from this, is there anything else in terms of skill set that a candidate should know?
Yeah, so because I am into the research field, it encompasses everything. Why research
Okay.
is required at this point of time? Because most of the policymakers, stakeholders do not have much idea like how to navigate their existing systems towards the new evolving frameworks of finance, right? So what we do financial modeling to make a
Okay.
business case of particular asset class. Suppose I have to evaluate, okay, this whole solar energy sector is much more profitable as compared to a typical fired power plant. So I have to do a financial modeling, or do a project finance modeling, do a risk analysis through modeling. So
Okay.
there you need financial modeling. Um, then you also have to do some kind of business case analysis, whether it makes sense for certain sector to decarbonize now, to decarbonize
Okay.
its businesses now, or to do it later. So then you have to do a lot of forecasting of capital cost going forward, what kind of technologies will be available, what are the cost curves. So you have to do modeling on that part as well. So there's a
Okay.
different kind of modeling that you have to do. So that's a hard skill. So if you know Excel modeling, that's bare minimum, I would say. That's great. You should be doing it, no, or try to get some kind of training, whether it's a corporate
Okay.
finance kind of valuation kind of modeling, or the project finance. Get at least good understanding of one of those things. If you can learn some kind of a quantitative tool like Stata or SAS or SPSS, that is always helpful in research at least.
Okay.
So, or maybe Python to do data analysis. Then comes the research skill, whether you can do research writing, you can talk to the people, take interviews, do primary research, stakeholder consultation, write long reports, do long research, long-term research.
Okay.
You can think from the very high level and then distill it down to a very specific issue, looking into various contours of the issue around it, so that eventually, if it is for the policymaker, they can understand whether, okay, what kind of financial instruments will be required in India to get more investments. So you have to get that kind of understanding as well. So improve your research skill. Second, so third is of course the communication, whether you can present your research or whatever analysis that you're doing to the audience which is not accustomed to all these concepts in a very simple terms, very layman terms. If you can do that, so that kind of communication skill you should be having, and this is applicable for any kind of financial research profile. I would say fourth skill, which is going to be very very important, there's a lot of standards that are coming up in this domain.
Yes.
Like you had, we earlier we had a lot of standards into accounting. You had US GAAP, you had IFRS, and then your Indian accounting standards. Eventually, they were trying to get converging. This is not the case right now. It's a very wide field. Understanding the climate risk, understanding the sustainability risk, environmental risk, social risk, what is the definition of all these terms, how a company can report all these issues into its disclosures or disclosure reportings. For
Okay.
all these things, there are global bodies which are coming out with standards, that setting the standards which are similar to, you can, analogy is the accounting standards, right? So you have to at least try to get an understanding of one of these standards. It
Okay.
can be a standard by GRI, which is Global Risk Institute. They have their own standard for a company if the company wants to report its environmental risk. You have a standard by IFRS, which is called ISSB. So it's becoming a global standard. So you should get an understanding what are those things, what a company is required to disclose. And there's a lot of opportunities that will be coming into that domain, and that will be at corporate and financial institution level, where they will need people who have understanding of these frameworks, at least one
Okay.
of them. It can be a GRI framework, it can be ISSB framework, it can be
TCFD.
TCFD, which is now merged within the ISSB. But again, these are all like global standards which are getting, and now for India it is BRSR, which
Hmm.
is governed by SEBI. But again, you should get abreast with one of these reporting standards, and you can actually, if you're not going to the analysis side, you can go into the reporting side also, if you have
Okay.
that understanding. So yeah, those skills I would say will be helpful.
And for somebody who is like you have done this. I mean, you have moved from India to abroad with the same climate side. So a lot of candidates now, they are switching into climate risk because they want to move to global side. So for them, can you guide them with 2 3 points what they should focus on?
So for personally, it was not never an intent to go outside. So, and what I would say that this particular space is very localized space. Although the standards are coming primarily from European countries, which are like front runner in this area,
Mhm.
but issues are always quite local. You have to have a good understanding what is happening in your country, what are the specific risks that your country is going to face, and these are not silo risk. Like if I suppose
Okay.
say, okay, your country needs to move from coal-fired power plants to a solar power plants, and government should come out with conducive policies for uh, solar. You cannot just suggest that, right? You have to understand what will happen to the existing coal fired power plants. We are not US or Europe that we can one day start decide, okay, we should stop immediately our fired coal plants and switch to solar. So you have to get that kind of macro understanding. So
Okay.
you have to have that local knowledge. But in any case, if you want to go outside, again, certification, if you're fresher and you do not have much experience, you have to get some global certification for sure, which I mentioned earlier. And there's a huge requirement even in global banks which are looking for these people. You should be very good in your quantitative skills,
Okay.
which I just mentioned. If you are an investment analyst, apart from knowing all the possible ways of integrating various risks which are more traditional in nature, you should now have an understanding how to integrate ESG risk into investment decision, and that require a very specific kind of understanding of these particular issues. If you
Hmm.
have those kind of a skill, and then maybe some global banks can think of hiring professional from outside as well. But yeah, I would still say it's quite a localized kind of profile. But yeah, um,
Okay.
there's never something you cannot do. If you do the certification, of course the recognition is there.
Okay, wonderful. Now, for people who are entering into this space, what is the trend that you're seeing, and what is the challenge that you're seeing in the future in the space?
So challenge, I would say first, is again a lot of people are just coming into this sector looking like others are moving there, and they do not have a good understanding of the space, and they just want to jump into the bandwagon, and then they later realize, okay, this is not something that they wanted to do. Although there's a
Okay.
lot of impact that you can create out of your work, you get to meet a lot of policymakers. At least in my work, you get to change an overall system through various nudges, so that gives a lot of satisfaction out of your
Hmm.
work. But you have to understand all these things first, whether are you ready to do all this thing, or you want to do hardcore investment research, M&As kind of profiles which are there, or typical investment banking research. So that is the question that you have to ask yourself, whether you want to enter into an interdisciplinary space, which combines research skills, understanding of the policies, a macro environment, and more importantly, whether you are actually ready to um, create an impact or not through your work, at least on
Okay.
this side. So that is one thing. Opportunities, as I said, will be in several domains. First is the research. Research will be always the first because, as I said, like government, stakeholder, investors, everyone wants to understand or get more evidence from research why it is important to incorporate sustainability into investment decisions, what kind of capital is required, what should the nature of the capital to attain certain climate goals. So that is that we try to provide through our research, through our analysis. We give our inputs to Ministry of Finance, different ministries or Niti Aayog, investors, banks, provide capacity building to the banks. That is one part. Second part is into the, as I mentioned, ESG investment analysis, which is slightly picking up in India now. It is quite a norm, like I would say a regular job now in many of these global financial institutions. They will have a division called an ESG investment analyst within their team, and they work very closely with their main investment team.
Right.
It is now picking up in India as well, and we'll see a lot of fund houses and these big insurance companies or pension funds will have these positions, and these will be very similar to your typical investment analyst job or equity research job, but you have to get the flavor of ESG risk understanding and how to
Okay.
integrate while coming out with any kind of investment analysis or any kind of investment decision that you want to give to your, you know, prospective investors. So that is second. Research, ESG investment analysis. Third is again understand the reporting standards. That will be another big position that will be coming up in most of the banks, I would say, because they are the first ones who will have to start reporting where they are giving their money to which sectors, and whether they are trying to mitigate some of the ES and G risk through their investment, through their lending portfolios. So reporting understanding will be a huge requirement. People who have good understanding of various standards, various frameworks where bank has to comply with. So that is another area. Fourth is bit, and it's another area, but not for, I would say, for fresh candidates, but again it's on the advocacy kind of profiles where
Mhm.
you try to work with governments from a very different aspect, try to involved into some negotiations,
Okay.
suggest government and what should be done in this space so that a government can reach its own climate targets. A government can create some environment which is very conducive for foreign investment to start investing into, say, India's solar industry or wind industry or electric mobility. So it may not be a research backed advocacy, but again, you are working closely with the government through some institutions, specific
Okay.
institutions which are specialized into this thing. But that is, I think, more for very senior kind of professionals.
Okay.
So
Wonderful.
these are the opportunities.
Wonderful, great, great. I mean, sort of this conversation is going to be motivating, and also a lot of people do not have clarity with respect to what is this space, how it is going to grow, what are the areas. So, your interview or your podcast is definitely going to be helpful for us and for the candidates to navigate to that space. So, thank you very much for taking out time and talking to us. And this is really really helpful.
Thank you so much, Ganesh, for having me in the interview. And it will be great that if I can inspire few fresh students to understand this field better, because we need a lot of
Correct.
people to start thinking about these very topical issues of our times. So yeah, it's great talking to you, and all the best, and it's great work that you are doing for our upcoming students. Thank you so much. Nice talking to you.